This is a channeling from Adama on the Legend of Lemuria and the fifth dimensional Earth. Now, I would first like to explain Lemuria, and then I will endeavor to explain the fifth dimensional Earth, for this will follow the chronological path, or the chronological way in which these events occurred, and which they may occur in the future. For I will indeed be speaking on possible future outcomes for humanity in the coming millennium. But first, we must take our story back tens of thousands of years to the ancient civilizations of Lemuria and Atlantis. Now, the legend of Atlantis is commonly well known. However, there are a few, shall we say, misquotes of this legend. And one of these misinterpretations or misquotes is that Atlantis was underwater, and this is not true, for all human beings live above the ground, or live above the water and breathe in oxygen, and at this time all of the human beings lived above the ground as well, with the exception of a few underground bunkers which were being built. However, I will get to that in a minute. But that being said, Atlantis was a very masculine civilization and could indeed be likened to the United States, or perhaps even other rather, shall we say, bullheaded countries such as Russia, or perhaps even Great Britain during its colonization days. But Atlantis was a land of great technological development, and for all of its hard-headedness and all of its corruption, it did indeed have many denizens who were quite lovely and loving. And Atlantis was a very, very prolific society. It had many people who lived within the city walls, and it had many suburbs, as you would call them now. But Lemuria, on the other hand, was across the earth from Atlantis in location, and Lemuria was a much more feminine civilization, for the denizens of this city, although quite hard-headed at times, were as a whole much less stubborn and set in their ways than those of Atlantis. However, as beneficial as this may be for the Lemurians, it did indeed cause some strife between the two civilizations, for when it came down to the wire, as you say, the Lemurians and the Atlanteans experienced some core beliefs that differed quite greatly. But before they had this clash, shall we say, the two civilizations worked in harmony for many years, and they were very what is a good word for this? They were very fertile civilizations, and I use that term in the broadest sense, for they were civilizations of fertile ideas, fertile ground, fertile people, and many more. And indeed, another word for this society would be prolific. Now, these people from Lemuria and Atlantis worked in harmony for many years. However, as their technology advanced, the Atlanteans discovered that they wished to learn more about how to manipulate their physical reality using more than just the elemental and other gifts that we have discussed in previous channelings, and these are indeed the higher and lower faculties. However, the Atlanteans believed that the higher and lower faculties, in combination with science, were the answer to life, the universe, and everything, to quote the famous book. But these Atlanteans began experimenting with many different types of science, from not only animal hybridizations to many different types of quantum manipulation that involved the creation and destruction of quantum entanglement relationships, and also the experimentation with dark matter. Now, dark matter is something that has just recently been discovered on Earth, and indeed, this was one of the flags that signaled that Mother Gaia needed assistance in this time, for there are many of the patterns from Atlantis and Lemuria from those ancient times being repeated now. But we will get back to that after we have fully delved into the story of Lemuria and Telos. But when the Lemurians became aware that the Atlanteans were not going to be dissuaded from engaging in these, shall we say, treacherous pathways, the Lemurians decided that they would withdraw from their relationship with the Atlanteans, and those who disagreed in Lemuria were welcome to take their leave of the city and migrate to Atlantis. However, the people who did so did find that they were frequently not met with much welcome, and the Atlanteans were quite discriminatory towards the Lemurians, for indeed the two people looked quite different. However, no more different than any of the races on Earth currently. But unfortunately, racism was a struggle for the Atlanteans back in this time, and one may find that if they are an earthly soul, that they are incarnated here on Earth and are struggling with any of the issues described by the Atlanteans, then they may be an Atlantean incarnate. And the same goes for Lemurians as well, for there are many of these beings who are incarnating on Earth now. But these Atlanteans were not dissuaded at all from pursuing these endeavors, and they received many, many warnings from not only Mother Gaia, but also the beings in the higher realms who were tasked with watching over Mother Earth. Now, the channel has asked a question regarding the previously mentioned non-interference policy from previous channelings, and indeed there is a non-interference policy on Earth. However, it only extends to a certain extent, and if one risks damage to their soul, another soul, or the soul of Mother Gaia, then higher Gaians may step in and aid, and indeed this was the case with Telos and Lemuria. Now, the Lemurians offered to bear the brunt of this cataclysm, of the destruction of these two societies first, for these Lemurians received the warnings as well as the Atlanteans, and they knew that not only would the Atlanteans not stop despite these warnings, but they also knew that following these warnings, the surface of the earth may become unstable and unsuitable for living. So the Lemurians offered to sacrifice their society first in order to provide a more stark warning to the Atlanteans. So after the entire city of Lemuria slid off the face of the continent and fell into the ocean, the city of Atlantis followed soon a few hundred years after. Now, I myself, Adama that is, was incarnated on Earth during the time of these events, and I am indeed a Lemurian from those ancient times. Now, I was the high priest, for a while I was training to be the high priest, and then as these events took place, the high priest passed on this role to me. And so the original, or the first high priest before me, my predecessor, took upon the role of preserving as much of the knowledge of Lemuria as he possibly could, and he chose the volcano known now as Mount Shasta as the location for the temple in which he would store this information. And this is indeed the Jade Temple. Now, he chose the stone jade, for not only was this a very common stone in Lemuria, but its properties were also that of the fifth dimensional frequency, so it would provide a good resting place for all of the fifth dimensional knowledge that Lemuria had acquired. For despite the fact that Lemuria had been on the brink of ascension as a whole, on the brink of enlightenment as a whole of a society, the Atlanteans made it impossible for the entirety of the society to ascend in this way. So while there were many Lemurians who ascended and became enlightened souls during the years leading up to these cataclysms, there were just as many who did not. And those who did not may indeed be incarnating at this time now. And if you feel a strong sense of resonance with this story, then I strongly encourage you to dig deeper into these tales, into these legends, these stories, these historical events, if you will. However, these are not the historical events of the textbooks as you read in schools. But indeed, during these cataclysms, my mentor, the former high priest of the original Telos, the new Lemuria, as we called it for a while, chose to pass on his torch to me and pass on from this mortal body into the ether, into the spirit realm, as you say. And thus I was chosen and granted the honor of holding the burden of protecting and safeguarding all of this information until a time arose on earth for it to be dispersed again. And this time has arisen now. But after Lemuria and Atlantis fell, indeed the surface of the earth was a very tumultuous place, and there were many natural disasters ranging from hurricanes to earthquakes and tsunamis to tornadoes and lightning storms to even things like acid rain and mass volcano eruptions that shrouded entire continents in ash for months on end. However, this was a necessary rebirthing process for Mother Gaia, for many of the animals on her surface had been tainted and their genetic makeup had been altered by the Atlanteans, who were attempting to extend their control beyond their natural means. And indeed, this is again being done now, and we in Telos here in New Lemuria hope that the earth heeds our warning and halts these endeavors immediately, or as soon as possible. For it is not only hurting the animals and Mother Gaia, but it is also hurting the souls of those who are engaging in this process, and attempting these experiments, shall we say, for they are replaying their own karma from these previous lifetimes as these Atlanteans, or if they are not from Atlantis and reincarnated from that timeline, then they are gaining new karma from these experiments. But thus is the nature of karma, unfortunately. However, I would like to speak a little bit more on the new Lemuria. So, as I said, it began with the Jade Temple here in Telos. However, those of us who decided to stay on the earth, created a sort of fifth dimensional bubble within the mountain of Mount Shasta. And this is why it is hollow, for indeed we did used to have a physical 3-dimensional location. However, we have since moved it to the 5th dimension into this bubble. And this came a few hundred years after the crust of the earth settled down again. For indeed, the energies of Mother Gaia were too unstable for us to construct this bubble at this time. But once she had completed her cleansing and rebirthing process, shall we say, that was these cataclysms, then we were able to access the 5th dimensional frequencies again, and we were able to construct this bubble. And this is where our society began. And we began solely in the city of Telos, which is the city underneath Mount Shasta. But as our civilization grew and our population grew, we found that we needed to expand our lands into other places. So we found various other caves and volcanoes and mountains across the earth, however, mostly in North America. And we have made our homes there. And we call this group of cities the Agartha Network. And the Agartha Network is very, very vast, and there are many cities across the Agartha Network, and they are all connected by a high-speed tram that, as I've said previously, runs at about 4,000 miles per hour. However, please note that this tram is powered by a means that is not yet discovered in your 3rd dimension, and it does involve steam energy. However, it is much more complicated than that. And perhaps the best way to describe it is the use of steam energy and capillary action. Interesting. But that being said, as we expanded our Agartha network, we also expanded the 5th dimensional bubbles in which our civilizations lived. And as these civilizations expanded across North America, for indeed this is an epicenter for the blight of karma, shall we say, on this earth at this moment. And we found that as we expanded our cities, we also expanded the access to the 5th dimensional frequency for the humans on the surface. For indeed, those of us under the surface, the Lemurians, as we call ourselves, the new Lemurians, we indeed are human. However, we are a very much more actualized version of human beings. And whereas most human beings have between 2 and 8 strands of DNA active, we new Lemurians have 64 and even more strands activated. $124? 124 and more strands activated. Pardon. Not sure where I got the 64 from. But that being said, with the surface dwellers' increased access to these fifth dimensional frequencies, this created a sort of positive feedback loop. And so for the past, shall we say, millennium or so, this feedback loop has been allowing the Earth to create, shall we say, its own etheric double. Its own double in the fifth dimension. So as this bubble has expanded, as this fifth dimensional Earth has expanded and grown, then the Agartha network and those of us living in the fifth dimensional frequency in this way have also expanded. And there are many of us who now live in Europe and Asia and across many other parts of the globe. And we have had a civilization for quite a while in modern-day New Zealand and Australia. For those two land masses, along with much of the coast of North America and South America, are the land masses that used to form the continent that Lemuria sat on. So our energetic signature, if you will, still resided in these lands, so it was easier for us to inhabit these lands. However, we chose to inhabit North America, for the coast of South America and Oceania were quite unstable during the cataclysms following the Great Fall, as we call the fall of Lemuria and Atlantis. But here in the Agartha network in Telos, we live a life quite different from the life that you all live on Earth. However, there are quite a few similarities of which you may be surprised, and one of which is the fact that we tap into your TV channels and we watch your TV. So indeed, we do have our own version of Netflix and chill. But that being said, that is about the only form of social media or any kind of media that we partake in from your civilization, besides the occasional fantasy novel, for we always appreciate a good story. But we don't have any form of telephones, for we do not need telephones in the way that you need them, for we can merely tap into the vibrational frequency of one with whom we would wish to communicate, and we may send them a message and they may receive it, all through the use of telepathy. And because we are in the fifth dimension, the space between us, the physical space between us when this occurs, is irrelevant. And it may indeed be likened to sending a text message with one's thoughts. Or perhaps it may also be a phone call sometimes, for one may simply if one receives a message and does not wish to respond at the moment, they may simply let the other know that they have received it and that they will respond later, much like read receipts on a text message. So this is the main way in which we communicate, even if we are standing face to face. And rarely do we talk the way that you all talk, using our mouths and the vibrational frequencies generated by our vocal cords. And we usually reserve this for occasions such as singing or other occasions in which one uses nonverbal vocal communication. And indeed, that was a euphemism again. But that being said, we also have a different form of gardening here, and indeed, if the channel wishes, I have offered to teach this to her once she has space to garden. And our method of gardening very heavily relies on the generation of electromagnetic fields to not only stave off any unwanted pests, but also to promote growth. For as a study showed that this channel read a few years ago, a group of scientists was studying the regrowth of limbs on lizards, and they noticed that when the lizard was regrowing its limb, the polarity of its limb would go from a negative polarity to a positive polarity. And then when the scientists manually altered the polarity of the limb to be a negative polarity, they found that the limb would not grow. So this is an example of the use of electromagnetic fields in healing and growth. And we use this by using copper and iron to act as a sort of conduit. For copper is very good with conducting the electromagnetic field into the earth, and iron is very good for generating this electromagnetic field from the ions present in the atmosphere. And so the copper grounding wire attached to the iron creates a sort of amplification of this magnetic field of the iron, and if one runs a copper wire attached to a piece of iron, and the piece of iron is above ground, but the copper wire is below ground, and the copper wire circles their crops or runs along the rows of the crops, they may find that this is optimal for increasing these electromagnetic fields. And indeed, this may aid in the growth of virtually anything, be it human, plant, animal, or even fungus. And indeed, we here in Telos also use the mycelium to aid us in our farming, for we do indeed eat many mushrooms, and we plant them as a recovery crop, if you will, to help to digest any of the plant matter that remains in the soil after we harvest our crops. So, for example, if we are growing wheat, then we simply just harvest the seeds that we will use to create the wheat, and we will leave the rest of the stalks and even the seed husks, if we can, in the dirt, and then we will grow mycelium over this same ground, and the mycelium will digest all of this plant matter and aid it in its decay, and therefore produce a form of compost topsoil, if you will. And indeed, we will mix in with this compost the various other wastes from our other livestock that we have. For we have much livestock? Yes, we have much livestock here in the Agartha network, for we are omnivores. And despite the common belief that a higher vibrational frequency yields a purely herbivorous diet, this is not the case, for humans are indeed naturally omnivores, and in order to maintain a healthy physical form, we must eat meat. However, you may not find that the meat on the Earth's surface at this time is sufficient in nutrients to sustain your body, and so indeed for many, a vegan or vegetarian diet may be beneficial. unless they have their own livestock or are buying from a trusted local farm that does not use any of the nasty chemicals, as this channel would say. But these chemicals are indeed various hormones, pesticides, herbicides, and various other things that are given to the livestock or that the livestock may ingest from the grains that they eat. So if one wishes to find good quality meat, they may need to vet their sources quite carefully. But it is indeed possible, just quite improbable. But that being said, further down the line in these channelings, I will share much more information about the nature of our civilization here in Telos and the nitty-gritty details of how we keep it running, for the nature of these lessons is to ultimately aid one in becoming aware of and understanding the steps that it will take to reach the fifth dimensional frequency, not only on a personal level, but also on a collective level as the human race as a whole, for the human race as a whole. But it is indeed possible, and we are hoping and praying every day that it comes to pass soon. And believe it or not, there are indeed a few civilizations on Earth at this time who are embodying this vibrational frequency. And they are very few and far between, and there are only a handful of them. And most of them are living out in the middle of nowhere in perhaps a very communistic style. But they do exist, and they are quite elusive, as you would say, and a few of them are even nomadic. But these people have managed to create their own bubbles of the fifth dimensional frequency, shall we say, similar to the way that Lemuria has. Now, I would like to explain this topic in a couple of different manners, for it is difficult to explain this topic in three-dimensional words, for it is not a three-dimensional topic, but I shall endeavor to explain it anyways. Now, previously I have spoken on the transformation of Mother Gaia from the third dimension to the fifth dimension, and I would like to explain the mechanics of this a bit more. So this may indeed be likened to meiosis, which is the division of a cell in an asexual manner. And Mother Gaia is doing this. However, it is happening in a way in which the three-dimensional Earth, which is the original Earth, shall we say, the parent Earth, and the child Earth, the new Earth that is being birthed, the fifth-dimensional Earth, are overlapping within the same physical space. However, they merely encompass different vibrational frequencies. And this fifth-dimensional Earth began within the core of the Earth, and it slowly has been expanding over the previous millennia, and over the past millennium, it has been brought to the surface of the Earth in select locations, one of which this channel was able to visit today. Now, these various different locations are areas in which one may feel either more connected to the Earth or perhaps even slightly ungrounded, for the fifth dimension may feel strange to one when they experience it at first, for it is very unknown, and it may trigger one's physical body to experience a bit of fight or flight, and this is a normal experience, for this is the ego of the body fighting back against an unknown experience that may perceive danger, or that may produce danger. And this is normal, and one need not fear when they have these feelings. They may just acknowledge them and then let them pass, and then go about whatever it is their initial intention was. But as these places started, or perhaps not these places, as these bubbles of fifth dimensional vibrational frequency have started popping up, I would like to note that they are not fully overriding the third dimensional frequencies quite yet. However, they are expanding, so the perimeters of these bubbles are slowly expanding to encompass more and more physical space. And once the entire Earth is covered in this access to the fifth dimensional frequency, then this access to the third dimensional frequency will begin to be diminished. And at this point, the third dimensional Earth will die off. However, this is a very, very slow process and has been happening now for about 12,000 years. Pardon, not 12,000, 1,200 years. However, it has been in the works and been being planned for many, many, many millennia before that. And indeed, I was privy to this plan during the collapse of Lemuria. However, at that point, it was merely just a speck on the horizon, and I was not aware of any fully fleshed out details. However, as this channel frequently says, it has been a wild ride for me, and I wouldn't have it any other way. For this has been a truly beautiful incarnation, and it is wondrous to see not only the horrible fall of civilization, but also the way that humanity has bounced back and built itself right back up from nothing to everything yet again. I only hope that we will not repeat the same mistakes again and fall into those same patterns of greed and darkness. But again, the hopes of these channelings is that this will aid in Earth finding its light and as a whole ascending to the fifth dimension. However, I would like it noted that it is certain that many souls will not make it up to the fifth dimension with Mother Gaia, and that is okay, for that is the soul's choice, just as every soul is given a choice in this. Some souls may choose to stay in the third dimension, and if that is the case, then we are preparing another third dimensional planet that is very similar to Earth, however, slightly different, and these souls will not be able to notice the difference. However, they will still retain all of their previous karma from Earth and all of their past life traumas, if they so have any. And the nature of this new Earth will be very much so like the nature of the current Earth. However, the soul of the Earth will not be the soul of Mother Gaia. It will be the soul of a different spirit. But that is neither here nor there, and that will be an issue for the beings who incarnate on that planet. But for those who wish to engage in the fifth dimensional Earth, you may be assured that you are more than welcome there, and you need only align yourself with the love and the light of our true Creator, and know that as you strive to live from a place of love and unconditional acceptance, that you will find yourself living from a fifth dimensional frequency, and you may find yourself gaining access to more of the fifth dimensional frequencies in the various places where they are. For just as this channel experienced the fifth dimensional vibrational frequencies of the waterfall today, she may not have had that same experience a few years ago, for she had not fully awakened those faculties and she was not fully living from a place of love at that point in her life. But thus is the nature of one's growth and evolution. And so if you find yourself unable to feel these vibrational frequencies, do not fret. Just know that your efforts may be better spent working on processing trauma and ridding yourself of karma and learning the lessons that life has to give you. For all will come in divine timing. But that being said, it is our goal that within the next 200 to 400 years, and if we're lucky, 100, or if we're unlucky, 500 years, that the surface of the earth will have completed this change, and not only will we, Agarthans, if you will, have fully emerged from the crust of the earth and begun to intermingle with the surface dweller humans, but we also hope that the civilizations on earth will begin to mimic those civilizations underneath the crust, and we hope that you will begin to adapt our farming and livestock keeping techniques, and perhaps even our building techniques. For our building techniques are much more sustainable than yours. However, they are much more difficult to achieve than our farming and livestock keeping techniques, for our building techniques utilize a form of manifestation in the fifth dimension that is quite physical, or perhaps as physical as you can get in the fifth dimension. For it is not physical from your third dimensional perspective, but from a fifth dimensional perspective, it is as physical as it can get. But it is as always, reality is in one's perspective. Plato got it right. But I digress. So we are hoping here in the new Lemuria that the civilizations on Earth will not only heed our warnings to stop messing around with things that they cannot and should not control, but also that they have many other things which they may control, and there are many different ways which they may control these things that they have not yet explored. And indeed, in this I am referring to the higher and the lower faculties. However, the current block that many beings have on accessing these is a block of trauma and karma, and many beings do not feel that it is necessary to work through their trauma and karma in this lifetime because it is not comfortable at all, and at times can be quite excruciating. However, as this channel has learned, the payoff is quite worth it. And if one is ever in need of strength or assistance in this endeavor, they may always call on their higher guides and also myself, Adama. But that being said, I would like to explain for a brief, or before we call it quits for tonight, a little bit about the nature of Telos. For Telos has a unique nature in the Agartha network. For Telos was a city that was built initially in the third dimension and the fourth density, and it has since grown and evolved to be in the fifth dimension and the sixth density. But that being said, there are some buildings that are in the third dimension, and some buildings that are in the fifth dimension in Telos, and indeed some of these overlap. So that means that depending on the vibrational frequency with which one is vibrating at, one may walk through one door and enter a barber shop, or they may enter a newspaper store or a print shop. So this is indeed quite a novel concept for the surface dwellers, but this channel found this concept to be quite fascinating when she visited Telos in the astral realm for the first time, so she wished me to share it with you guys. You're welcome. But also, that being said, if one is vibrating at a third dimensional frequency, they may experience a church standing to their right and no building standing to their left. However, if they are vibrating at a fifth dimensional frequency, they may experience a skyrise office building standing to their left and nothing to their right. So this is the nature of Telos, and indeed this is unique to Telos and not to the other cities in the Agartha network. For Telos was the first city in which we Lemurians lived after we made our way from the surface of the earth to below the crust to escape the cataclysms during the Great Fall. But that being said, I would like to explain a little bit more about the patterns that are similar between the times leading up to the Great Fall and the times that are occurring now, for there are indeed many. And one of these is quite a visual example, and I have been excited to use this for many years. Perhaps excited is not a good term, but I have looked forward to using this, for it is a very visceral example. Now, back in Atlantis, the scientists and biologists were messing around with hybridizing DNA and creating chimeras, or genetic chimeras, which are beings that are created by merging the DNA of two separate species to create a new species. So, for example, in Lemuria, we had animals that looked like zebras, but instead of having stripes like a zebra, they had spots like a giraffe. And similarly, we had animals that looked like giraffes, but instead of having the spots of a giraffe, they had the stripes of a zebra. And indeed, these animals came in varying colors. And this can indeed be likened to the ligers and the various other hybrids that have been created nowadays between lions, tigers, and leopards, and various other large cats. For indeed, despite the, shall we say, good intentions of this initial endeavor, which were to save the endangered species of these large cats, this effort was indeed partially due to the need for the karmic lesson of this hybridization DNA to be played out, or the lesson of learning to not play with this hybridization DNA to be played out. For many of the beings who incarnated as biologists and zoologists in Atlantis are incarnating as beings who have chosen those same professions now. And this is similar to beings and people who are incarnating now as quantum physicists and other types of quantum engineers. Or perhaps that's not quite the right term, but this channel is unaware of the official technical lingo for the people who create machines such as particle accelerators. For although there is much to be learned from the particle accelerator, it does indeed have many limits, and one may learn just as much from going inwards and meditating and following the spiritual path as they may learn from a particle accelerator. And indeed, one may actually learn quite a bit more from meditation than they may learn from the cool machines. But that being said, there is indeed still a bit to be learned from those machines. However, they are quite dangerous, and one wrong move could lead to what would be perceived and called a tear in the space-time continuum. But it may actually be more of an energetic rift, shall we say, in the Earth's energy field. And that would be quite detrimental to the Earth's development at this stage of her development. And this is why many star seeds are also incarnating right now in these professions to aid as a sort of grounding rod or a balancing act for the beings who are working out their own karma. And indeed, these star seeds are aiding these other beings in working out this karma, and they are also aiding Mother Gaia in working out this karma as a whole. So my gratitude is with those beings, for they are performing an immensely important job, and even if they are not aware of it. However, that is not to diminish any of the other jobs that starseeds do, but I always like to express my gratitude for the starseeds who have chosen to incarnate on Earth at this time, for it is no easy feat to live in the third dimension. So kudos to you. But that being said, there are many other types of lessons that are being played out right now, and one of which is the people pleaser trend, or the people pleaser pattern, as we have said in previous channelings. And this one actually stems from Lemuria. For we Lemurians were so non-confrontational and so intent on protecting our peace that we did not stick up for Mother Gaia, and we didn't raise a fuss with the Atlanteans when we should have, for we knew what fate would befall Mother Gaia, and we regret not working harder to convince the Atlanteans that they should have stopped their endeavors. For although there were beings here in Lemuria who did indeed contribute to the Great Fall, it was, by the vast majority, the Atlantean civilization that caused these cataclysms to occur. And I don't deny that Lemuria aided in paving the way for Atlantis to do this, for we aided in many of their early experiments, but we were unaware of the outcomes, for thus is the nature of this incarnation, unfortunately. But live and learn, as they say, and indeed I have lived and I have learned, and it is my hope to help the other beings on Earth right now live and learn in their own way. And there are many ways to do this. However, the best way for one to do this is to strive to live from their heart and to live in the most authentic way possible. For if you find one judging you for being authentic, then you will know that it is not a reflection of you, it is a reflection of them. And one judges you not because of who you are, but because of who they are. So if you ever find yourself being judged, please remember this. However, that is the tale of Lemuria, and it is a great one. However, I hope it is not repeated. And indeed, I will reference this tale in future channelings, for it is my homeland and I was raised through these cataclysms, and they crafted me into the being that I am today. And despite the immense trauma I experienced from watching my entire home and family crumble beneath me as I watched from the mountain, it was indeed a great lesson in the way of this earth. For she does indeed forge her own path, and we may not see it at all times. But that is where faith comes into play. And that is the one thing that your religions got right. That faith will lead us where we need to go. And faith did indeed lead me where I need to go. And faith led this channel where she needed to go. And it will continue to lead all of us where we need to go. So if you ever find yourself lost, you need only surrender. Or perhaps you may also feel inclined to reach out to us here in Telos and know that we have been lost and we will always help you find your way back. But that is all that we have for this evening, and as always, it was a pleasure. Toodaloo!